The Birdie Man. It was written by me in 1941. It all began on Monday afternoon when Jake and I had a date to play on the Wilshire Public Links. You all heard of Jake Spilsby, the greatest and most promising golfer of 1939. Sure, you remember him, don't you? Who doesn't? Remember Spectacular Spilsby, the man who never missed a shot. Now I want to tell you what really happened to Jake, why he went to the top in a flash, and why, when he was about to win the PGA, he quit the game as if he were dropping a hot potato. It was a warm, sunny day, one of those that make people loll around, where work is so hard to think about that it would make you feel worse straining your mind to the problem of bringing the old Mazuma into the family unfillable treasure bag. I decided that it would be impossible to get anything done, so I might just as well call it a day, pull up stakes, and head for home. I was just getting the derby put on my shiny, hairless cranium when my poor, worn, torn ears that had stood 1,000 battles in the none-too-soft business world heard the piercing wrangle of the infamous enemies to all vacations, the telephone. I stood there debating whether I should let it go and ring or ease my curiosity and see which one of my dear friends was about to interrupt my afternoon of ease and relaxation. "Hello," I said, none too cheerfully, for letting my curiosity get the better of me. "Hello, Dan. Say, I've got a wonderful idea." Right away I knew it was Jake, with one of those brainstorms of his, like going swimming in the lake, Michigan, in midwinter, or laying out in the sun by a fish factory. This time it wasn't so bad. It was only asking me to play a round of golf with him. Well, I heed and hawed and told him I wanted to go home and see what it would be like to rest for a day, but as usual I had no chance against him. I swear he could talk a deaf man into buying a radio. There I was, an hour later, with my trusty war clubs and my high-flown ideas of how I was going to break 90 that day in front of Starter's office at the Wilshire Public Links. As usual, I got stuck for the fee, but I was so happy to get right out that I didn't even set up a holler. Jake looked pretty good that day for his first drive, got all of 250 yards, and for the first time in his life, he didn't slice. Yes, I got a 250-yard drive too, 100 straight up in the air and 150 out. We had just finished driving when we were joined by a third member who asked us if he might play with us. Well, I sized him up and saw that he was at most no more than 5 feet 2 inches tall, wore a great horn-rimmed glasses, and so I at once decided that he probably wasn't a very good golfer, so he might as well join us and we'd have three of a kind. It seemed that he was a Chinese student of different countries' histories, but I am getting ahead of my story. Well, he drove off and had a drive of about 180 yards, which looked pretty darn good for a student who looked at least 50 years of age. The first hole was one of those long 4-par holes that any decent sort of course that had a grain of fairness in it would have called a 5-par. Well, as usual, I ended up with a 6, Jake with a 6, and our Chinese friend with a 5. Well, after 6 holes of Wang's parring the course, it just got too much for Jake. He came in with a beautiful 6 on the 250-yard 6, and that was just too much for him. He let out a bellow that could be heard clear across all 18 holes of the course. Blank, blank, blank. And then threw the club about 50 yards. He looked at Wang for a minute as though the other's birdie was going to kill him, but he finally settled down and tried to be calm. It was then that this magic lantern stuff came into the picture. Jake started talking as all 90 shooters do, saying that it just must be luck, because he knew that he was doing everything right and he still couldn't hit the ball. You know, he told us, I sure wish that I could birdie 8 holes and par all the rest of the time. That's quite a wish, my friend, Wang smilingly told him. And besides, if your wish came true, you would soon hate the sight of a golf course. After all, that's what makes golf interesting, not knowing what your score is and always trying to improve your game. People hate sameness and are always trying to improve their game. Why, you would quit golf after 6 months of coming in 8 under par all of the time. Not me, Jake told him. Just think of it. Always being able to hit a really good game and never having a bad day. Why, it would not only be perfect, but it would take all the worry off your mind and you would enjoy the game more. Well, they argued about the relative merits of the issue until after we had gotten into the clubhouse and I had failed to break my 90 and Wang was 4 over par, with Jake bettering me with an even 90. They still couldn't settle the argument even when we were ready to go. Well, I finally pulled Jake away from Wang and started him on the way home. But just before we left, Wang said, "Something as long as I live, I'll never forget." "Jake," he said to him, "there's only one way to settle this dispute, and that is by actually being able to do what you want. That is birdieing 8 holes and parring the rest. Therefore, I'm going to grant you your wish and make you stick by it for 1 year." Before Jake or I had time to say anything or even laugh, he was gone. And that's the last we ever heard of him or saw him. We looked at each other for a minute and then we started to laugh at the old geezer. "I guess he thinks that he is Aladdin," Jake laughed, "and all he has to do is rub his magic lamp and all his wishes will come true. That sets us up for another drink. Boy, anybody that could dream that up makes you take a drink to forget." You know, I thought he was okay. Why, you would think that anybody would be okay that he could come in with a score of 4 under par. But I guess you never know, do you? That was the last I heard about it until a week later when Jake called me up. "Listen, Jim," he said to me, "I may be going crazy, but I came in today 8 under par. You know, Jim, that I've never broken 75 before, let alone come in with a 64. You don't think that guy Wang had anything to do with it, do you?" Naturally, I told him that it just happened to be his day and that he had been extra hot, I said. "After all, everybody gets hot every so often, and you just happen to be extra hot. That's all." "But Jake," he answered with a troubled note in his voice, "that wasn't just extra hot. That was breaking the course record. Of course, it just had to be my luck that nobody was with me. I didn't even take a caddy. But what's true is true, and I still shot a 64, even if it won't be official." Of course, I came back with a crack about not counting every 4 strokes. He got sore then and hung up with a bang that made my ears sting even on my side of the line. Well, I didn't hear anything from Jake for another few days and thought that he had been having a daydreaming spell. I began concentrating on making a little to tide me over for a little vacation in the summer when I got another call from Jake. "Listen, Jim," he calls me with a frantic sound, "I'm going crazy. Yesterday I played golf and I shot another 64. And this time I was in a foursome and had proof of it. You know, that means I've broken the course record officially. Believe it or not, birdied the last 7 holes straight. So just put that in your pipe and smoke it." Well, what could I say? Of course I was dumbfounded. Imagine Jake Spilsby even parring the course, let alone coming in with a course record in the bag. You guessed it right there. And then I told him I was going out for 18 holes with him tomorrow. Yes, that began a vacation for me that I'll never forget, and sure hope that I never have to go through that again. Next day I came out bright and early to see an exhibition of the world's weirdest golfer. Now, there was nothing really wrong with Jake's golf. He was just an average man who had a fairly good swing, but nothing spectacular. just one of the many who flocked the courses, and just a little bit better than most of them. We begin the first hole with Jake having his usual 200-yard drive, which had a little slice on the end of it. Oh, my drive. Well, let's say that I had to shoot my second shot before Jake shot his. Now, you know how the first hole of the Wiltshire course is one of the longest 5 parts in the country, all of 600 yards, and the last 200 all carry. Jake's second shot is miraculous because he hits a terrific ball, but it starts traveling straight out toward the trees, looking as though it would go a mile into the rough. But just as it goes in, he gets lucky, bounces off a tree, and the ball hits the rough, rolls along the hard ground as if it were skimming along ice, and stops just off the fairway, giving him about a 350-yard shot all in all. Well, I caught up with him about 3 shots and watched him take his third. This time nothing can save him, and he dubs a shot for about 50 yards, but at least he gets it on the fairway. His fourth shot he finally gets on the green and then sinks a 20-yard putt. That was the most spectacular thing that you've ever seen in your life, for the ball's going fast, too fast, it seems to be any good. It rolls over the cup, hits the bank, bounces out, and seems to sit on the edge of the cup. But just as we go over toward it, it falls right back into the hole. You call that hole spectacular, do you? Well, he was just warming up. Honest, I never saw anything so strange in all my life, because he just keeps parring and birding holes, one after another, like nobody's business. You know the third hole, where there is a dog leg to the right and a gully down below for those errant souls who want to take a shortcut? It seemed Jake wanted a shortcut. He tries to take it, but naturally he ends up in the gully. You call that spectacular to you? Well, listen to this. When he came up from the bank, his aim was too good because he went straight for the green, but unfortunately for him, he buries himself in a sand trap at the edge of the green. Jake is rousing mad by this time, and he went stomping over to the trap. He grabs up a niblick, says a few, shall we say, Will Hayes banned words, and slugs the ball, hardly even looking at it. You guessed it. It rolls out of the trap, goes straight for the hole as though it'd been attracted by a magnet, and Jake gets a par out of the hole. Well, you can take it or leave it, but I swear it's the honest truth, all right. Smart boy, I will tell it once more. If you don't take it, you can leave it, because this will positively be the last time you or anybody else will hear about it from me. That's why I've written down one of the strangest things that ever happened to me or any pro or amateur in that ever invaded the game of slug the old apple around the golf course. If you don't believe it, well, that's all right too. But don't come back at me and call me everything from A to Z and finally end up with that plain 4-letter word, liar, because I say it happened. Listen, smart boy, I've been razzed by the biggest and best, and I have had enough. Sure, I'll tell it once more, but this is going to be a permanent telling. From now on, if anyone wants to know what happened to Jake Spilsby, why, let them read about it. What happened was that I graduated high school in the summer of 1941, and I was able to go to UCLA, but I had to make enough money to go, and I couldn't get a summer job, and the only job I was able to get was caddying up at Griffith Park and the courses there. And that's how I learned about golf and learned to play golf. And I wrote this at the end of the summer because I'd gotten to know a little bit about golf. And I just thought it was something that seemed to me a little bit interesting.